Hello, welcome to the official IVM Podcast YouTube channel. This is Podcasting 101. My name is Abbas, and joining me today is the host of Aneesh Singh, Aneesh Bhasin. Hi, Aneesh, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me.
So, in case you're watching us for the first time, Podcasting 101 is a live stream that we've been doing for the last couple of weeks on the IVM page. And what we do here basically is talk about podcasting. Anish has his own show called Anish Thing. We will put the link. A link will be somewhere in the comments. And this is also a live AMA session. So, in case you have any questions for Anish or about podcasting, you can put them in the live chat, and we will try our best to answer them. So, Anish, let me just start off by saying I think I've told you this before. It's your podcast name is one of the best names I
Yeah.
think that someone thought of. Um, just for someone who hasn't heard your show or doesn't know what your show is about, just tell us in a nutshell what Anish thing is about.
In a nutshell, Anish Thing is a podcast for I'm 37 right now.
Right.
It's for the 27-year-old Anish.
Okay.
So it's all about subcultures, very varied topics.
Uh-huh.
But I think things a younger me wanted to know or learn,
All right.
and I still do. And it's just that, and it ranges from everything from coffee to relationships to clothing.
Hmm.
Basically, things that interest me and things I think people should know more about.
Okay. I've been dying to ask you this question. Do you think podcasting itself is a niche right now in India, or
I thought everyone's a podcaster now.
that's what I was getting at? Or do you think we've crossed that phase where now at least people are aware what a podcast is in India, at least?
I think people are aware of what a podcast is, but I think for me, I was very clear that podcasting, like to me, it also has to be on YouTube
All right.
because I personally consume a lot of content on
Right.
YouTube.
Right.
And it blows my mind when people say they don't watch YouTube or they don't use YouTube
Okay.
because I get most of my information from there, even
Right.
including news.
Right.
So I do think that the medium of content has evolved so much, right?
Hmm.
Like why did I get into this?
Right.
My whole point was that I'll end up talking about things like this, which is in the culture, lifestyle sort of a space
Hmm.
on my Instagram.
Hmm.
But that's not an archivable, searchable
Correct.
sort of a platform, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So rather do it properly and put it up on a podcast, YouTube, everything. It should be searchable.
Hmm.
That was one very important thing for me.
Hmm.
And I do think people understand what podcasts are, and it is becoming a lot more popular in the last 1 year itself.
Right. And do you remember the first time you heard a podcast or were exposed to a medium like this and you were like, okay, that's something I should try out? Because I'm assuming, so you have a sizable Twitter following even before you started the show. What was that one moment where you were like, okay, I'd like to give podcasting a try?
This sounds terrible, and perhaps I shouldn't say this, but I've not heard of any podcast before I
Okay.
thought I should do it. The only podcast I'd heard of was Anupam's and Sheila's at some point,
Right.
as they were friends, and
Right.
then Varun, who's also a friend.
Yeah.
But I've not heard too many episodes or too many different podcasts.
Okay.
Uh, but again, YouTube, yes.
Right.
Even though something like MKBHD's podcast
Yeah.
Waveform,
The
that's
tech.
also on
Yeah.
YouTube, right?
Mm.
That's just audio, but I would end up listening it more on there than a Spotify podcast or
Got it.
something.
Mm. Okay, so when you say, since this is the IVM channel, let me just say, when you say Anupam's podcast, you mean Paisa Vaisa, and
Yes.
Varun's podcast being Advertising is Dead, which you can find on the IVM podcast network. So tell me about, I mean, is a niche thing something, did you always wanted to name something that and this was the opportunity and he was like, yeah, I can use this
Everyone's
here?
asked me that. How did you convince them to have your name in the podcast? अब ऐसा नाम मिला है पेरेंट्स से तो यूज तो करना पड़ेगा.
But it's such a, again, I'm harping over this, but it's such a nice match made in heaven that the topic we want to talk about exactly
Yeah,
is your name. So
is my name, and I took the initiative to do that. So
brilliant.
yeah, so I have a couple of these staples. One is Anish, like it would always come up, and some of my
Right.
friends call me
Of
Anish,
course.
A N I C
Yeah,
H
yeah,
E,
yeah.
and you know, it's also a word that I've used a lot when we've been building Swami. Swami is my company. We make tonic waters, ginger ale, sodas, and we so many times said that we don't want to be a niche product.
Right.
Uh, so it's a word that actually comes up a lot
Uh-huh.
in my day-to-day conversations.
Right.
And when I was thinking of this, right, I didn't want to go into old cliche name like the Gentleman's Club or
Mm.
like I didn't want any of that
Right.
vibe.
Right.
Uh, I don't want the vibe to be that there are two men in a suit
Mm.
discussing something,
Mm.
which happens a lot in luxury lifestyle sort
Correct.
of a space,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
A lot of
Yeah.
times it's not approachable, it goes into this
Yeah.
direction. And a lot of things I do talk about are niche things, but again, niches can be in very different contexts, right?
Correct.
Something niche could be $1 billion industry, something niche could be much smaller. So
Mm-hmm.
I think it encompasses a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And my pitch from day one to
Mm-hmm.
I, I I just called up Amit once.
Mm-hmm.
This was during the pandemic,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, I want to do this, and I'm sure he must be getting how many calls,
Right.
emails on this. So he obliged, I think, at that point, and he said, okay, send me a note or
Right.
something. So I
Yeah.
made a nice little PDF deck,
Uh-huh.
and I'd started with the name as Anish thing
Mm.
right off the bat from
Right.
there,
Right.
and honestly, I didn't like. It just so happens to be my name, but
Yeah. Yeah.
it just works for me.
Correct. Um. So I think the first episode I heard of your show was the one about vinyls, and I was just scrolling through the list of episodes you've done. The great thing about a show like yours, and also I think something that I want to know from you, is that every episode is a completely new approach because
Yeah,
you're finding out about something completely different every episode. So A, how do you decide who you should talk to? And B, is there a format? Is there a format of preparation that you have to do some common things? Because again, so I do a podcast on the network called Has It Aged Well, where we talk about movies.
yeah,
So that's a given. Every episode is going to be a movie.
yeah.
Okay, agreed. Some movies are going to be different than the others, but I know broadly what the structure will be. So how do you go about structuring your episodes?
So for me, of course, the broader spectrum is culture,
Right.
and in a way, everything is part of culture. So
Right. Yeah.
I've given myself a very broad
Correct.
canvas to work with.
Yeah.
But within that, there are some pillars that will keep repeating themselves,
Mm.
right? Like food and beverage is going to be one,
Mm.
in which coffee is going to be a recurring subject.
Mm.
Alcohol could be a recurring subject.
Mm.
Like the first podcast episode for me was on coffee,
Right.
and now we've done one more. So the first one was why you should even drink black coffee.
Mm.
The second one was Aeropress recipes by two of the India Aeropress champions.
Mhm.
Now there's a third episode on coffee, which is everything from a plantation side. I've
Correct.
got a really good uh, plantation owner on the
Mhm.
episode. So
Mhm.
every topic that I want to talk about,
Mhm.
that also keeps developing.
Right.
Like if I look at fashion,
Huh.
uh, I know very little about fashion, right?
Mm.
But I know about denims. Denims was something I really got into.
Mm.
So my first episode around this was on streetwear and sneakers, like a primer on what streetwear is, which includes sneakers.
Right.
Then the second episode was only on Air Jordans.
Mm.
The third episode was on raw denims.
Okay.
The fourth episode, and that was how to build a capsule wardrobe.
Okay.
So I think there'll be certain pillars
Mm.
that I'll keep working on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the way I see it is that a lot of these things could be podcasts by themselves.
Mhm.
Fashion could
Correct.
have had
Yeah.
an entire
Of
podcast,
course.
coffee could have had an entire
Yeah.
podcast. So a lot of these kind of things I want to keep building on. Like if I look at alcohol, there was one on craft beers,
Mhm.
and then there was one on 20 bars in Asia you should visit. So
Right.
F&B again becomes a recurring theme, but
Right.
it's pretty broad within that also.
Yeah. Yeah. And how do you decide who you need to talk to about a particular niche?
I think so. There are few cases where I know the people already to
Right.
begin with.
Yeah.
If I look at the coffee episode or the vinyl episode, the first coffee episode was with Rahul from Subco.
Mhm.
I love the brand. I love the coffee. I trust in what he's doing.
Mm.
So I have that credibility and that equation already. The vinyl episode was with Jude. My entire sound system is set up by him.
Right.
So again, I fully trust him
Yeah.
and stuff like that. But then sometimes you find experts in the field. Sometimes you find people who'll also be fun.
Mhm.
Like these two bartenders from Singapore, very, very well known guys. They were in Bombay. And I was like, hey, you guys are in Bombay, let's record. And they're
Mm.
like, yeah, let's do it.
Mm.
So, and some now are remote, like people who are not in India. So I
Right.
think for me, it is about finding people who are really into it, in like who live it every day.
Right.
And I think that's the most important thing.
Yeah. That's actually That's actually a good way to think about it, because you know that you'll never reach a point in the episode where, because they're passionate about it, they'll
Yeah,
talk about
yeah,
with passion
yeah.
about said thing. So there's no fear of it running out of fuel.
A lot of times, I would have to pull the conversation back,
Right,
saying that, no, let's get back to this.
right,
But to me, I think everyone I've got on the podcast is super passionate about what they do.
right. When you started the show, did you have a length of an episode, like what an ideal length of the episode would be, or did you just freewheel it and then come to a conclusion?
No, I think we decided there would be average of 40 minutes to 60 minutes.
All right.
And I think 45 is the average that we're doing,
Okay.
with like one break in between, sort of a format.
Okay. Any reason why the 45 mark seemed good to you?
I just think it was a good balance between not being
Too
just surface
long.
level,
Right.
and then
Okay.
also not being too long.
Mm.
But I listen to some, so now I do listen to a lot more podcasts,
Right.
again, on YouTube rather than
On
Spotify or only
platforms. Yeah.
audio.
Yeah.
But a lot of these are 3 hour episodes.
Right.
And like, you're doing your work, you're hearing something, then you missed 5 minutes, then you're back in it.
Right.
Uh, to me, also, this is the return of long form content in a way.
Yeah.
And I really enjoy that, and I really miss that, because 10 seconds reels, 15-second
Yeah.
reels,
Yeah.
like, so much has become that, right?
That's true. What's also weird though now, I think, is a lot of people are discovering podcasts on reels because they see a 60, 45 second, 60
Yeah.
clip, and then they want to decide whether they want to listen to the entire conversation or not. So yeah, it's this weird thing where I also prefer long form content, but I'm like, if the short form is getting people to the long
Of course.
form, then
I,
then I'm all
I
for
think
it.
that's one thing I'm now becoming a lot smarter about,
Right,
how to cut reels and what to put up.
right.
So this one watch episode that we did,
Yeah.
also, for me, a lot of the subjects I cover, right,
Hmm.
a lot of them come with this sort of a, like, watches. Collecting watches can become a very expensive sort of a thing.
Yeah.
But my other thing was, let's just break it down for all budgets,
Right.
starting at
Exactly.
like under 5,000
Yeah.
rupees,
Yeah. Yeah.
10,000 rupees. So the reel that we made of that episode is
Mhm.
at some 850K views.
Mhm.
And now I'm also starting to become a little smarter about what all to put in that,
Right.
because that reel's first cut was me saying that if your favorite fashion influencer talks about Daniel Wellington,
Hmm.
they don't know anything about watches,
Okay.
which is a very true fact. But that reel got so much
Traction.
traction,
Yeah.
and that did get views, that would have led to views.
Right.
So absolutely, I think trailers, right, in a way, that's what it is.
Actually, yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I think just cutting proper trailers is also becoming a art.
Art, correct. Yeah, I was going through your episode list, and you had one about affordable headphones as well.
Yeah.
And that's the title of the episode. So, like you mentioned, you didn't want it to sound like two men in suits talking about expensive
Yeah.
shit. So that was a really well done. So many episodes down the line, do you see a difference from how you approached the first episode to how you approached the last one you
So
recorded?
Kavita is one of the co-founders at IVM.
Yeah,
So when we got the green light to do the show,
yeah,
she was like, "I will be there to work with you on the promo, the trailer,
right,
and first episode, and I'll handhold you in the beginning."
yeah.
And the amount she had to, I think she was so irritated at one point. She's like, "Anish, a little more emotion," and I was like, "Itna emotion."
Right.
uh, and it came to a point when we were recording the trailer. She's like, "Okay, you know what? Let's just go line by line. Just speak how I'm speaking." So she would read the line and I would read the line. And then she told me one thing, that record your first episode, like the first 5 episodes you actually record, release the fifth first. So that
Okay,
sounds
right,
better.
right, right, right.
Uh, super legit advice. Everything she said was so correct. And now when I look back, and then it's not been that long, I'm definitely a lot more confident
Okay.
on the structure, the questions, how to pull the conversation back, how to rebuttal,
Mm-hmm.
when perhaps to take a break,
Mm-hmm.
even
Yeah.
basics like that. That sounds so basic, but you don't realize, right? And I think my intros, outros now can happen sometimes one take, uh, or 2, 3 takes at the max. There were times it would be like 10 takes, 20 takes.
Okay. So it's gotten much better.
It's gotten much better.
That's the broad
Yeah.
point that I'm getting. Okay, so I spoke to Saurabh, your producer, the Saurabh Sharma who produces your show, and I asked him, what do I talk to Anish about? Like, I have to, about podcasting 101. And he was like, Anish ऐसा बंदा है, आप उसको किसी भी चीज के बारे में बात करोगे, he'll be able to carry the conversation.
Yeah, he didn't tell me any of this, huh? By the way, I have no context only about today's recording.
So he said, you talked to him about food, you talked to him about tech, you talked to him about anime. He can carry off all these conversations, which I think is a skill because uh, has there been any episode where you went in thinking, of course, when you go in, your purpose of doing the show is to learn more about the thing,
Absolutely, yeah.
but did you go in any episode where you were like, okay, this topic doesn't interest me much, my objective is to get more interest out of this episode?
No, it's definitely
Okay.
something I would be curious about. Otherwise, I don't think I would want to talk about it.
Okay, Sparsh is in the comments saying maybe niche, elbow cuff, elbow cuff, elbow cuff. Okay. Thanks, Sparsh. Sparsh is also one of our producers. But sorry, going back to your question. So yeah, you never went in with with a feeling that, okay, I'm not as interested in this stuff as some of the other stuff.
No, I think everything I'm talking about on the podcast, I'm curious about myself.
Okay. But there's got to be a hierarchy, right? I mean, I like talking about food more than watches.
Which I'm very consciously like trying to not do food that much, because
Okay.
for me it's so easy, because I also come from that industry.
Exactly. Yeah.
That is
Yeah.
so easy to do.
Right.
So sometimes I have to remind myself this is not a food podcast. This is an overall subculture podcast. So that balance needs to happen. Uh, like the other day, I told Saurabh, I was like, just book the studio this time. I think he's also now a lot more wary of who I'm getting. So he's like, no, but who is it? What's the topic? I was
Right.
like, coffee. He's like, no more coffee. I like, let's just record, we'll bank it, which is what we did.
Right.
But I think for me, I just have to be careful to not get into F&B that much, because
Right.
that's super easy for me to do.
Mm.
And keep things varied. Like, it's been a while that I've spoken about watches. I think it's been 2-3 months to that. So that's something I want to bring back.
Okay.
And hierarchy wise, like, honestly, I'm a curious person. So
Right.
I'm good to talk about or get into conversations about lots of things. So
Okay.
it's not about, but I don't want to talk about something that I'm trying to forcefully do just because it might sound cool and I may not be into it.
Right. Got it. So I mean, there's no TikTok episode coming just because it's the in thing.
Someone from Instagram reached out
Okay.
saying, do you want to talk about Instagram? We can get someone on the podcast. That's
Mhm.
something I would want to do,
Okay.
because I don't think anyone understands how Instagram works.
Sure.
So that, yeah. But will I do an episode on how to dance on TikTok? Absolutely
Right.
not.
Right. Because that's just trending. So when you have to do shows like you did a show with Anupam Gupta about finance,
Yeah.
You did a show on the Constitution. Now these are fairly serious topics, right? They don't fall into technically under the culture bracket, especially something like the Constitution. Is there a sense of more responsibility you go in with these episodes, that you're dealing with something that might be a little serious to talk about?
I actually think they're absolute part of culture. And I'll give
Okay.
you examples.
Right.
I want to do one episode on 5 laws you must know,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But this includes, and this happened, I've seen this happen with me, I've seen this happen with other people, where this is actually a practical example. We were at a friend's place in Warsaw, first floor house, so close to the road, playing music at night, not very loud. And these 2 cops come up, right? Music louder, we switched it off, no problem.
Right.
They're trying to come inside the house.
Mm.
And I was like, you can't come inside the house.
Mm.
But most people would not have been able to say that.
Correct.
And just to know basics, when are you even supposed to let someone in?
Correct.
If it's a cop? Like, our first thing is that we get scared of cops.
Right.
You should absolutely be respectful of cops. You shouldn't be blank scared of cops, right? Once I was taking this was bizarre, again, personal example.
Sure.
I'd parked somewhere and the car got towed, and I went to, this was in Tardeo, went to the jockey, and they're like, your car was 10 meters at the corner, so that's not allowed. Cool. Rule broken, pay the money, whatever. And then I noticed behind the counter, all the fines were put down. And I was like, where is it over there?
Correct.
They're like, no, it's there in the book. We're like, okay, show me the book.
Right.
They couldn't find any book where it was actually written, this thing was written down.
Mm, mm, mm,
So I had a big fight with them.
mm,
I still had to pay the tow thing, but I didn't pay the fine.
mhm,
But I think we should just know some, like, to me, this is a very cultural thing, right?
mhm,
You shouldn't be, like, so many times we get intimidated by cops.
mhm.
That shouldn't happen. So
Right.
to me, that's part of our culture.
Okay.
Something like finance, like credit cards,
Mm,
such a huge part of culture.
mm,
And I have a lot of friends who don't have a credit card. And why
mm,
would you not have a credit card?
mm.
So to me, these are more serious topics,
Correct.
yes,
Yeah.
but they're very relevant topics.
Okay. All right.
Like I have one set of friends who can go on a full holiday
Mhm.
because of credit card points.
Really?
Yeah, I'm
Okay.
one of those people.
Yeah, I mean, I did again. I saw one of the clips that was released from that episode was about credit card
Yeah.
points. So yeah, I know you have discussed it on the episode. When you said culture, I was under the impression of pop culture, so that's what I was assuming. But you're very correct. Both these things are very relevant and very worth knowing.
Yeah.
Um, is there a niche that you haven't spoken about, but want to on the in a future episode?
Um, Let me think. There'll be so many.
Mm.
My new hobby right now. Also, there's a way to also for me to learn new things.
Right.
So I recently got a drone. So I want to
Okay.
learn more about drones.
Right.
So I'll do an episode on drones. Get a
Sure.
drone expert.
Yeah.
Uh,
So that was the thing. I mean, when your show started, the first question that came into my head was how many niches can one touch upon? How many niches are there in the world? And every now and then, your producer would come to the office and ask us, like, are there any, again, not to overuse the word, but is there any niche things that you know about
yeah.
that we would like to get on our episode? So it's a very interesting way to look at it, where yeah, you have to think of things that don't have a massive following, but a hardcore following.
But so many things, right? If you look, like going back to the example that a lot of these things are also umbrella topics, right?
Right.
Just within coffee, there could be
Hmm.
so many aspects.
Hmm.
Just in fashion, there could be so many aspects.
Right.
Just in sneakers, there could be so many aspects,
Right.
right? So when I say Anish, it's not that I'll only do one episode on sneakers or I'll
Correct.
only do one
Yeah.
episode on whiskey. There'll be
Hmm.
multiple episodes on that.
Yes. Yes.
Has so many things, man. Pencils, ink, shoe polish.
Right.
So many like you get to Reddit forums on polishing.
Huh.
That's another thing.
Okay.
I've gone down the ink rabbit hole. I have so much ink from this brand called J Herbin, which is supposed to be the first ink company in the world.
Okay.
So yeah, these things can keep going on and on.
Ink as in pen ink.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
What has been the response like? Have you gotten responses from people who ideally would not know about a particular thing, but because they heard your episode, they are willing to give it a try?
Yeah, I think this happened with a bunch of things. Coffee was one
Right.
because we were just harping on just don't add sugar to your coffee. Just try
Mm,
that out a few times.
mm.
And I think that's a feedback I got from a lot of people that, you know what, we tried this out and we tried this out.
Okay.
Uh, to me, one very cool thing was I was running the marathon in Jan,
Hmm.
and there were two people who screamed saying, so I had my Swami cap or
Right.
I had Swami on my running jersey.
Right.
So two people while I was running screamed saying, "Oh, we love Swami," and three people said, "Hey, we love the podcast." I was like, okay, that koi to sun raha hai fir.
Right. Yeah.
Which was good. But I do end up getting feedback, and you know something like I done an episode on is animal diet superior,
Mm,
and I start that episode by saying I know there's going to be a polarizing
mm.
thing, and I'm going to get people from all camps to
Yeah.
talk about their side of the
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
Get a vegan camp, someone from other,
Mm,
and there's this Italian content creator, vegan coach who's now based in Switzerland.
mhm.
He did a reaction video on that
The
episode.
episode?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that was fun. I thought,
Right.
okay, this is reaching somewhere that
Yeah.
someone's doing a
Yeah.
reaction
Yeah.
video to this. And I've just recorded an episode with him. So when
Okay.
he spoke about it, I was like, would just come on the podcast, right?
Right.
That's the whole point, that
Yeah.
let's hear everyone's views. So that was good to see that someone in Switzerland's doing a reaction video to
Yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Uh,
Was his reaction in favor of what you were saying,
oh,
or
no, completely opposite.
okay?
and that's the fun part. Like, to me,
Exactly. Yeah.
nutrition is a super polarizing
Right.
subject.
Yeah.
Also, that's how internet is, right? You can
Mm.
Google why a potato diet is healthy, and
Yeah.
there'll be some logic to that. But the good thing in this, again, to me, when my guests, I want them to be living and talking and put their money where their mouth is.
Hmm.
And this guy's like, if you look at him, like, he's fully beefed up, full
Hmm.
physique.
Hmm.
You would never think this is a vegan bodybuilder.
Right. Yeah.
So good episode to talk to him, get his side, and
Mm.
someone who's practically doing it.
Yeah, I think that's one of the other advantages of podcasting. I think I personally feel like there's a lot more people with differing ideas talking to each other on a podcast rather
Yeah,
than shouting at each other, which is what we see on television. So I think that's something that podcasting should be applauded for. We have Shubha Smith Gupta
coffee niche.
saying "kafi niche." Okay, thanks,
Also,
Shubha. Yeah.
uh, just one more thing I just remembered:
Hmm.
the Watch podcast.
Yeah.
I've got a lot of messages on that.
Hmm.
Right from the comments on YouTube, right from the comments on the reel on that.
Hmm.
So I think even on the Watch episode, the amount of feedback I've got from so many people has been very encouraging.
Okay. You did an episode on iPhones, if I'm not wrong.
Yeah,
Do you consider an iPhone, owning an iPhone, a niche?
no, if you look at the numbers, definitely not.
Right. So then what prompted you to do an episode on an
Again,
iPhone?
tech, right? So that's what I mean. When I say niche, the scale of niche can be very different.
Okay.
Uh, so happened that iPhone 14 was coming out. So
Right.
basically, two phones that I do want to cover every year
Hmm.
is iPhones and the new Pixel launch.
Okay.
I think these are two important phones to generally keep a tab on.
Right.
Uh, to me, Apple is still a niche overall.
Okay.
And I don't think people use their iPhones or Macs the way they possibly can.
Okay.
So I will have future episodes specifically on a few things to do
When
with,
you say not using it as they should or they can.
like, one of the episodes I want to do in the future is, which was part of my original list I'd drawn up, is uh, what makes a Mac a Mac.
Okay.
I don't think people uh, like, even my mom uses a MacBook Air,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
she's nowhere close to a power user.
Right.
But that thing can do so many things, or the
Right.
way you can use it.
Yeah.
It's great to see the penetration and the acceptance,
Mhm.
but I don't think people know half the features of the iPhone.
I agree with that because my sister uses an iPhone and she gets the newest one that comes out, and her only criteria is with the camera.
Yeah.
That the camera is the sharpest or the most
Yeah.
cutting edge, and that's the only reason she buys it for. And it almost, I am not an iPhone user, but it almost bothers me that she doesn't know all the 99 other things that
Yeah.
the iPhone can do. So yeah, you're definitely right on that. Uh, and what was the? I haven't heard that episode. I'm sorry about that. But so what was your outcome
So
from that
no, so
episode?
that was more like a hot take on the
Okay.
iPhone 14, because Nishant, who's a friend, is the editor of Stuff Magazine.
Right.
He was at the launch in Cupertino.
Hmm.
He'd just flown down.
Hmm.
So I was like, let's just, since you have the device with you, we had a press sample that time.
Hmm.
I was like, let's just do this right in time when the phone's about to launch. So that for me is a very relevant topic. I talk about iPhones in Google Pixel a lot on my Instagram. So it's a very
Okay.
natural part of what I talk about.
Hmm.
And I'm a big Apple fanboy, but I'm just pissed at Apple right now.
Okay.
This iPhone 14, 13 is just a mess for the camera.
All right. How did you go about spreading the word about the show when you started? I'm assuming social media was one big part of it.
Yeah, I think mostly social only.
Okay.
Uh, now I'm learning to do other smarter things, which, like, for example, be a part, let's say, watch as a subculture, right?
Mm.
Um, be part of more forums,
Mm.
post stuff there.
Hmm.
But initially, it was just purely, I think, IVM and my social,
Right.
and then word of mouth.
Okay. All right. There were no like if you buy a Swami product and scan something, it
Not yet.
redirects you to the
Not yet.
podcast.
Which reminds me, I once had 4 people from the Swami team. We did an episode
Right.
on black t-shirts.
Black t-shirts. I remember that. Yes.
Because we all just wear black t-shirts, and
Right.
and finding a black t-shirt is not as easy as one would
Really?
imagine. Yeah, a good black t-shirt.
Okay. Okay. So, I mean, what are the if I may say so?
The winners
Yeah.
of black t-shirts from that episode were March T, what I'm wearing right now,
Okay.
Also, March tees on discount
Actually,
till end
define
of
what a
March.
good black t-shirt is.
Fits well, doesn't fade. Uh,
Hmm.
yeah, like price to performance ratio.
Okay.
Uh, I think the two winners were Uniqlo, and
Okay.
Uniqlo has so many different types of black t-shirts also,
Hmm.
right? From Merism, which is more oversized, to um, some other stuff, and March tea.
Okay. Has there been a topic you have thought of doing an episode on but not done it because it might come across as a bit elitist?
Uh,
Because I'm thinking of cars. There's a whole culture about cars, but again, I may not listen to that episode because I cannot think of owning an expensive car.
so the one that we did on cars is
Mm.
about restoring cars.
Okay.
With this old friend of mine called Rayo.
Okay.
Uh, but he talks about how the easiest and perhaps the coolest way to get into car restoration as a hobby
Right.
is getting a Maruti 800 and restoring that.
Okay.
And we talk a lot about that, and
Mm.
that's very approachable as compared to trying to restore a old Mercedes or
Right.
a old BMW.
Yeah.
So even in that thing, which can get elitist,
Mm-hmm.
the point was that it doesn't have to be that way.
Right.
You could restore a motorcycle also. You could restore a Maruti 800 also.
Mm-hmm.
And it's more about that joy of bringing something back to life and
Mm-hmm.
just having longevity on it.
Okay. Uh, there's another comment from Shubha Smith. He says, some of my favorite episodes are pizza, watches, rum, sneakers, cheese, coffee, and perfumes.
Thank you.
Nice. You did an episode on pizza.
Yeah, so the pizza episode was just on, we only spoke about pizza.
Right.
With Alex, who's a very good friend of mine. He makes, I think, the best pizzas in town.
Mm-hmm.
And 20 minutes he spoke about the hydration of the dough and stuff like that. So,
Mm.
and that's the other thing. I'm happy to geek out on the episodes, right?
Right, of
It's
course.
it
Yeah,
has,
yeah,
otherwise, what's the
yeah,
point?
yeah, yeah.
So, and it was funny. So he owns and runs this restaurant called Americano, which is a fine dining, very cool. You go there in shorts. You could go there
Mm.
for an anniversary. Like
Mm.
it's super nice place. Really good food, really good
Mm.
drinks. And we're talking about pizza, and the base is a very important
Yeah,
part,
yeah,
right?
of course.
And ask him, where do you get your flour from? And I'm expecting him to say this mill in Italy or whatever.
Mm.
It's like a local meta.
Mm.
But the way he's working with it,
Correct. Is
so
unique.
he doesn't
Yeah.
have this double A flour coming in from some other country or
Mm.
whatever. He's using local meta. He's
Mm.
using local suppliers, but
Mm.
he's figured out how to work with that.
All right.
So that episode was actually quite cool.
Nice. If someone wants to start out in podcasting, are there any tips you want to give them or any things that one should keep in mind?
I think, like with most things, I think things look easier
Mm.
than what they are.
Mm.
This is something that Amitabh told me, that at least make a list of 40, 50 episodes.
Okay.
I think that's super important to do if you're thinking of starting off. And I would not do anything in the self-help or entrepreneurship thing, man. I cannot.
Yeah, because it's
Can
like
we please stop that?
yeah, I was about to say you throw a stone and it'll hit a
How
self-help
how many
podcast.
founders can we interview, man? Same thing. So I have that fatigue, or perhaps because I'm from the startup
Correct.
space,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
see
yeah.
too much of that, and beyond a point, it's like all the same stuff.
Mhm.
Uh, I would say just pick more interesting topics,
Okay.
and don't just try to see what everyone is doing because that seems trendy or whatever.
Hmm. Okay. Do you feel any difference when you record with a guest in studio and when you do a remote
I
recording
would
with
ideally
people?
only want to do in studio. I know
Okay.
it's not practical,
Right.
but for me, audio quality over video quality,
Hmm.
and it's just most people won't have a decent audio
Correct.
setup,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that is my reluctance to record as much in the studio versus remote.
Mhm. All right. One last time, if you're watching this and you want to ask any questions, you can put in a comment in the chat. Otherwise, I think we had a pretty nice and fun chat with Anish. Anish, if I had to ask you to recommend 3 episodes to someone of Anish thing that are like a gateway drug for
Yeah,
people, what would you like to tell them?
I would say the first episode, coffee,
Okay.
because coffee is all around us,
Yep.
and there is no reason that in 2023 you should have a single cup of average or bad coffee. So definitely that episode.
Right.
I think the episode on polyamory,
Okay.
which is just from a point of view of understanding a different perspective on relationships and love,
Right.
which is super interesting. And I would say the sustainability episode, which I recorded with my sister.
Mm.
Also, my family's been on the podcast quite a bit.
Okay. Your
Uh,
mom has been on
my
one, I
my
know.
mom's
Yeah.
been on a hypnotherapy
Yeah.
episode. My sister's been on a sustainability episode. My brother-in-law, who's also my partner at Swami, has been on the black T-shirt
Right.
episode. And my father has a podcast.
Okay.
So yeah,
Would you want to plug his podcast?
we're,
Let's
we're,
do that.
we're a very uh,
Podcast friendly family.
we're a very podcast friendly family, and my dad's podcast was commissioned by Spotify.
Oh, nice.
So when I told him I'm also starting a podcast, he's like, "How much
Yeah.
is Spotify paying you upfront?" I was like, "Yeah, you know what? No one likes to show off."
Ah, okay. That's interesting actually. So, did you take any tips from your dad before you started on this?
Yeah, yeah. Also, I think we're a very tech friendly family.
Hmm.
So entire pandemic, I've just seen dad with a
Podcasting.
mic.
Yeah. I think
So
the pandemic was a podcasting boom,
yeah,
sort of a period for us.
yeah.
And Shubha Smith has given us a smiley, crying, laughing face. Thanks for that, Shubha Smith. Am I pronouncing your name correctly? Shubha Smith. Yes, Shubha Smith Gupta. Thank you for that. Thank you, Anish,
My
for
pleasure.
taking time out and giving us a little tidbit of what your show is like. Would you like to tell us what the next episode of Anish thing is about?
Uh, I
Or would you
think
like to keep it a secret?
no, I'm not sure which one's releasing this
Okay.
Tuesday
Cool, cool,
because
cool,
we
cool.
have a few in the bank. But
All right.
please see on Tuesday what comes
Sure.
up.
Cool. So Anish's show is called Anish Thing. You can find it on the IVM Podcast Network or wherever you listen to podcasts or on YouTube itself. So do search for it, watch it, listen to it, rate it, comment on it, and let us know what you think of the show and of the live stream in general. And would you like to give out your social media handles? Where can people follow
Yeah,
you?
so my social media is Anish B, ANESHB, and I'm the most active on Instagram.
All right. And you can follow me on Twitter at Abbas Momin and Abbas Momin 88 on Instagram. You can listen to my show. It's called Has It Aged Well, which is also on the IVM Pop feed and on YouTube as well. So that was Podcasting 101. Thank you so much.
Bye bye. Thank you for
Bye
having me.
bye. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and we will see you next week with a new podcaster and talk about podcasting some more. Thank you. Bye
Sounds
bye.
good.